everyone doing tonight? Erev Pesach. Pretty much, right?
I didn't factor that in when we decided to do this, but yes, it is Erev Pesach. It feels like Erev Pesach.
You get even more reward for being here tonight. It definitely does feel like Erev Pesach. So tonight, as I said, we're talking about how we tell our stories as Orthodox Jews. And both of you I handpicked to be part of this discussion. Leslie and I go way back. We were colleagues together teaching at the same school at Betzafilla. Dovid, I'm like, I don't know, between the podcast and #1 in the charts right now. Let's just shout it out.
Oh, that's very kind of you.
Absolutely. I'm also a podcaster, so I do sort of keep an eye on those charts. But, both of you, when I think about if, let's say, someone who had very little exposure to Orthodox Jews asked me to introduce them to an Orthodox Jew, my first thoughts would be Leslie Klein and Dovid Boshevkin. And why I say this is no, seriously, it's not so much that I think that you represent all Orthodox Jews, because what I love and what I think this project is doing here is showing the diversity. But I think you both each represent yourselves very well, and your passion for Yiddishkeit and your passion for Judaism. Both of you are, very committed in terms of Jewish education. That's both, something that's so important to you. And that's, your inward focus. But I see both of you as people who are also looking outwards. You care about, how we are understood and viewed as an Orthodox community and the different work that you do. So that's really by means of introduction. And I'm going to ask you each to sort of share and introduce yourselves to our audience here tonight. Keeping that perspective in mind, from as someone who's sort of seeing you and seeing what you all do, social media and beyond, and how you contribute to the community. So Leslie, go for it. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So first of all, I want to respond to what you were saying about that very nice compliment that you would nominate me. So, I've been told many times, I've had people say to me like, as a compliment, wow, you're not a typical Orthodox woman, right? Or you're not what I expected. You're not like, those other Orthodox women, and it's like, thank you. Like, I think you're meaning that as a compliment, but it's really not a compliment. It's really not a compliment at all.
Because you really could be like, hey, I'm taking that as a compliment. And that would be throwing so many people under the bus. It's like, wait, that's an insult.
You know what? This has been a little bit of a crusade of mine since I was in college, and I couldn't handle when people would say like, oh, well, I'm not the typical Stern girl, or you're not a typical Stern girl. And it irritated me then. What's a typical Stern girl? Because most of the women I go to college with are like really smart and intelligent and motivated. So what's exactly your stereotype? So really when someone says a quote unquote compliment like that, really what they're doing is exposing their own stereotypes and their own biases. And it reminds me of, have you ever heard the Hebrew Mamita?
No.
That piece? Oh my goodness.
Uh-oh.
Her name is somebody Google Hebrew Mamita. So because the name of the artist is escaping me. She's fabulously talented, and she has this spoken word piece where she's in a bar and someone says to her like, oh, you're not a typical Jewish woman, and she launches into this whole thing of like, what do you think a typical Jewish woman is? And she's not speaking from an Orthodox perspective, a globally Jewish perspective, but that piece resonated with me so strongly, and it still does. I think about it all the time. Occasionally I'll go on YouTube and just listen to it again, just in case I forgot any of it. Oh, come on. I'm looking for a comment of somebody to put the name of the artist.
Oh, no. Well,
come on.
Before you tell everyone like what you do, because a lot of people, I think everyone knows Dr. Leslie Ginsparg Klein, but I'm sure there are people here who don't. I do just want to say that we have a lot of followers actually on our account who are not Jewish, who are actually interested in learning about Orthodox Jews through Faces of Orthodoxy. So tell us a little bit about your background and what you do.
Okay, so what do? I am yes, Vanessa Hittery. Thank you. Yes.
Who said that? Give them a shout out.
I don't know. It disappeared.
Okay.
Renad. I don't know. Cool. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
So what do? So I am the academic dean of an Orthodox women's college. I research the history of Beis Yaakov in America. I am an amateur singer, songwriter / comedian, and I host open mic nights for women. I've been doing that for 15 years. What do I do? And then, I don't know, I do whatever. I'm on social media. I dabble in advocacy, which you and I have been on many projects together.
Yeah. Great.
And I'm a mom to 4 amazing kids, Kinahara, wonderful husband, and I'm, I just abdicated bedtime tonight, so thank you for getting me out of that. But, I'm trying to keep, about I'd say about 56, 57 balls in the air at any given moment.
Okay, so you're balancing pretty intense work schedule, also interfacing with the secular roles, right? You're an academic dean of a women's college. And I just love your musical ability and your talent. So I think, unfortunately, like you said, yes, there are stereotypes. I think you break those stereotypes, but they're just stereotypes. No one wrote the list of oh, this is what an Orthodox woman looks like, or should do or shouldn't do. Okay, Dovid, tell us a little about yourself. Thanks for your patience, letting the ladies talk.
Oh, no, please. I was hoping I would formulate a clever, smart response, but I haven't. I'm so, be honest, so deeply uncomfortable with this. I think I'm a pretty. I'm
sorry. Are you checking the comments? Poor Yaakov Lager, you're hijacking this live, Yaakov. I know you just want to come on, but you're not invited.
I am pretty typical Orthodox Jew in a lot of ways. Maybe I'm not a typical representative, which I'm very uncomfortable with.
Right.
I'm uncomfortable with it because I've gotten criticism in all directions for that, and I don't even blame the critics of that, because I don't look at my individual identity as Orthodox Jew. It's not how I introduce myself. So maybe I should start.
Right.
I'm an educator. I share educational ideas, content in classrooms, on pages, on podcasts and screens, and that's what I do. I'm pretty typical, honestly. I'm not so exciting.
I'm sorry, you're being a bit humble, but
This is exciting. This pillow is exciting.
Yeah.
Oh, that pillow.
What does it say?
It's
those blue Maferet that we had in grade school.
Yeah. I've seen that. Okay, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about our account while I have the opportunity. Just share with me just some thoughts. I'd like to hear from you, objectively. I mean, I know you're not going to start, insulting. You're only going to compliment it. But
this account, I think the biggest question is, and when we project our religious identity, I think it's always a question of who are we projecting it to and why? And I think it's really hard to be authentic and real when there's if there's a polemical role involved. That's always what I'm trying to figure out, even with myself. What you project outwards, what's the purpose? Why? What's the audience you're trying to reach? Mm-hmm. That's always what I'm curious about.
What do you mean by polemical role? I have these 2 academics here on this live, so you have to translate for me.
Polemic, in art, that's for an ideological driven argument. Where you're trying to say, well, you think that Orthodox Jews are X, where really Y. And I think sometimes, I don't know, I don't always buy that. I think sometimes we're X too. We could be jerks. We could be annoying. We could be frustrated. And all the things that we could possibly be accused of. I've met unsavory Orthodox folk.
For sure. Sure.
So it's always a question of what are we trying to highlight and the purpose, I guess. Is that all that I surface that?
I mean, I asked you what your thoughts are, and you're coming back to me with a question. So I guess I know, right? Please answer my question. Okay, let's see. What are your thoughts about Dovid's question here about checking our motives? Here's an account. The goal is to share and celebrate the real lives of Orthodox Jews. Authenticity is really, really important, because we're not here being hey, you know, the media is showing us in a certain light, or Hollywood is showing us in a certain light, and like we want to show the world that we're perfect, and like, you know, we're poster boys and girls of Judaism. That's not the goal.
Being human is never perfect. But I think that being human is very important, especially in this day and age. I feel like more and more you are seeing Jews be dehumanized, and within Judaism, Orthodox Jews being dehumanized. So any effort that shows, that humanizes people, that shows the human face of Orthodoxy, that these are people we're talking about, not a category, not a stereotype, is something that is helpful.
Yes.
I mean, just the number of Jewish lives that have been lost in the past couple of weeks, and just the complete lack of like caring in the world is it's terrifying, and it's painful. And I happen to have recently read People Love Dead Jews, and that book really blew me away. Just the analysis of anti-Semitism, and you just see it. You see the dehumanization. You see like the attacks on visibly Jewish people. That's scary. Right. So, and why? Why would you attack someone? Because they're not human. They're not human anymore. They're representing something to you, and reminding the world that Orthodox Jews are in fact human is unfortunately important.
I think it's important anyway, because how often do we have this opportunity to share, you know, the human side to us? When do we have the opportunity to tell our stories and all of our diversity, you know, and all of our complexities and nuances, and not necessarily in a reactionary way? But I think, you know, the goal really of the project is twofold in terms of the target audience. And it's interesting, if you have, you know, when we talk about marketing, you have your primary target audience and you have your secondary target audience. I think number one, certainly the audience is for, you know, those who are curious and who want to learn about Orthodox Jews. If you've never met one, where are you going to find one? So if you're, you know, in a neighborhood where, or in a part of the country where you have zero exposure, guess what? We're all scrolling on our phones, you know? So if we can definitely reach those who are interested in learning about us and learning about our everyday real lives, where we may be grappling with a universal struggle that someone else may be grappling with, and showing how, you know, our faith informs our struggles and our lives. I mean, that's certainly a part of it. I will also say, I think there's something to be said about, you know, for the Jewish community, both the Orthodox community and the secular Jewish community, to, you know, share these human stories for each other. I think the more we can learn about each other and our individual stories and journeys, and, you know, share our authenticity with each other, I think we're all role models. I mean, if you took a look at Batsheva's story, if you took a look at Hannah, who we just profiled, and Yehuda, I mean, these are my heroes. You know, I look at them, I learn so much from them, and that gives me, we say in Hebrew, it's chizuk. Like, that gives me inspiration and strength, not because they're perfect, the opposite, because they're sharing a little bit. They're not sharing everything, you know, and that's part of this, like the vulnerability piece. And we also have values of Jewish modesty and how much we're going to share with the public. But I think there's benefit. I think it benefits all of us. Anyway, so let's talk a little bit about, you know, how, and this is the discussion tonight, is, you know, how are we meant to tell these stories? So, you know, if we have neighbors or colleagues who know us, and then, you know, they learn about us through these individual interactions, that's great. But do we have a responsibility to be like, hey, you know, we see what's going on in the news, we see what's going on in Hollywood, we need to stand up and tell our stories and share our stories? Is that something that we should even be concerned about? And if we do think that it's important, how do we go about doing that? So I'm curious both of your thoughts about that.
Leslie, you go first.
You went first last time. Oh no, it's not true. Actually, you went first last time. What are my thoughts about that? So, you know, I mean, I think obviously this account is modeled after Humans of New York, which kind of started this genre, and it's a beautiful account, and I think part of the idea of Humans of New York was that we're all living in the same city. I lived in Manhattan for 10 years. You're living in the same cities. You're passing people. You don't even know your neighbors. I had my roommate once was in Starbucks and she saw someone and she like waved her and she waved back. And then she was trying to figure out, how do I even know her? She realized that she lived in the apartment across the vent, like across, like, you know, New York apartments. Mm-hmm. They faced other apartments and sideways. So they used to see each other through their bedroom windows. Mm-hmm, she realized that's how she knew her, but really they didn't know each other. You're anonymous. You don't know your neighbors. You don't know your neighbors at all. So the idea was to kind of give that visibility of like, we are one city and to connect people. And I see the same purpose to this account. So I mentioned before the dehumanizing piece and kind of humanizing it, but I think there's also an element of destigmatizing things that in our community shouldn't be stigmatized anymore, and yet they still are to a great extent. Disability, being a single mom. So I think highlighting those stories is very important, from both the inreach and the outreach perspective. Yeah. But if we're talking about now we're talking about within the Orthodox community, that seeing those stories is very inspirational. It's one of the reasons why it drives me crazy when people edit out of Sarah Schneer's story the fact that she was divorced.
This is the founder.
Why are you editing it out?
Tell us who Sarah Schneer is. Just remind us.
Sarah Schneer was the founder of the Beis Yaakov movement, which universalized Jewish education for women and girls. Mm-hmm. So she was divorced, and it's literally been edited out. It was edited out of an article that I wrote. Mm-hmm. Okay, I wrote an article about Sarah Schneer. I'm reading the final version published, and I'm like, something's missing here. Oh, the fact that she's divorced. He just took it out. You know, and why? Why are we taking out those pieces that can bring inspiration? You know, there's a famous discussion about hagiography, and there's a famous letter of Rabbi Hutner who says that when you remove all adversity, then you zap inspiration. That people are inspired by seeing how others overcame adversity. And while it's inspiring in humans in New York, there's an element for somebody who is Orthodox that it's more inspiring if you can see that someone who is Orthodox was able to overcome that adversity, because then they're in the same community and the same kind of conceptions, and you know that you have the same kind of community, the same, and this person was able to overcome adversity. That can be very inspiring. And that can be very, very meaningful to people who are struggling inwardly or outwardly with the similar issues.
Mm-hmm. It's universal. Mm-hmm. Zev, anything you want to add?
I feel like I regret what I say. I'm very honest with you. And
he feels like he's going to regret what he says.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm taking notes.
Is, you know, you mentioned the term dehumanizing a few times. I don't get upset when I see, I don't get that upset. Sometimes I chuckle when I see depictions of Orthodox Jews that don't cohere with my own self-identity in Hollywood. If I'm going to be really blunt with you, the people who make me feel most dehumanized about my own Orthodox commitment are usually other Orthodox Jews.
Wow.
There it is.
Can you elaborate? Meaning, when they embarrass us, when they do the wrong thing, and then they represent us.
The people who are coming to me and making me feel like I am not a proper representative of Orthodox. You could cut my mic. You could kick. Are you allowed to kick this?
This will be recorded and posted on our account, but keep going.
No, but a lot of times it's other Orthodox Jews who say this is not something that you should be sharing. This is not something you can share. And I would be lying if I said that when I look at the antagonism that I get for my own Orthodox story, it is not usually from outside the community. It is usually from within the community. And I think that the primary effort that needs to be made is just the way we talk to other people. And I don't know that it's a denominational issue. I think it is a human being issue. It is a basic Menschlichkeit issue. And I have been spoken to in ways that I have find so dehumanized. You mentioned it twice. I didn't even think we were talking about this. But if you asked me, have I ever felt dehumanized because of my affiliation with Orthodoxy? I would say yes. I have specific incidents in mind, none of which I mention now. And every single one of them was from people within the community.
Oh, hold on. We're having a semantic issue here. I'm not talking, because you're defining dehumanized as kind of belittled and criticized. I mean, I'm talking, when I said dehumanized, I meant it real, like literally, like Holocaust-esque Orthodox Jews are not people. Literally. When someone becomes not a person anymore, they become a caricature or a concept. I mean, read like Holocaust literature, like how were the Germans able to do, you know, etc. They didn't view Jews as human. So, you know, like using Jews and dogs in the same sentence, like there was no difference. I'm really talking about that literally lack of value of Jewish life. That when people who are dressed Hasidically get attacked on the streets of New York, there's a dehumanization piece. They're not people anymore. There's some kind of enemy. They cease to be people. Now that's a totally different story than what you're saying, which is the criticism, which I hear what you're saying.
I think there are two very real audiences that when I'm using the term, I'm not using it in the, you know, historic anti-Semitism sense. When I feel dehumanized, I guess it's saying that my own selfhood, my own personhood is being overshadowed and being replaced by a label, by a demographic, by a very particular set of values that I don't get to decide whether or not I'm reaching them. Someone else is deciding for me. And that could be, you know, that's a struggle. It's not, I'm not comparing this, for sure not. I don't want to get in trouble for that. But when you ask my own opinion, like that's definitely something that I grapple with. And I think that within our community, that's, you know, and I mean, I saw somebody ask, what do I mean by the community? It's a great question. I'm talking about people. I think Orthodoxy is a self-identified label. Whether or not you self-identify,
when people say rabbis should do X, Y, Z.
No, like when you the way I think Orthodoxy in general is whether or not you self-affiliate with Orthodox institutions. It's like an institutional affiliation. Who knows what goes on behind anybody's closed doors, but you see what institutions they affiliate with, and they're affiliated with you know, institutions from the Orthodox movement.
Okay. I'm going to look at some of these questions that we're getting. Someone asked, how do you balance our differences with quote unquote Orthodox Jews are just like us? I don't think the goal is Orthodox Jews are just like us, because we're not. You know, we have, you know, our whole religion with our whole lifestyle and our whole values and beliefs that are guided by the Torah, that are just because, you know, we may have similarities that we want to highlight. I don't think that we're giving the message that we're just like everybody else. So I think that's important. I do think that's also important here in a type of project like this is we're not, you know, yes, we are using this term Orthodox. Dovid just said, you know, people can identify with Orthodoxy. And, you know, something that I'm just going to throw out here now is the hashtag My Orthodox Life, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit more. This past summertime, which I was involved in and Leslie was involved in, something that I love is when you check it out on Instagram and you see all the posts of people who posted, who identified as Orthodox. And you might have a picture there of someone who, you know, isn't following the standard modesty. I know there's this one picture of this woman, you know, who, you know, isn't covered up like I am, you know, she's wearing a tank top, whatever it is. The next post next to her is a Hasidic woman. They both identify as Orthodox. So that's really beautiful. But for this project, I think it's just so important to show the diversity. And, you know, we're not defining like, you know, this is what everyone needs to look like. And this is everybody's stories. Like we're telling, you know, we're going to be showing pictures here of people that you might look at them and be like, wait, that's an Orthodox person. And then you're going to hear what their journeys are. So I think that's important. Let's talk a little bit now about social media. Social media as a platform.
George.
Say again?
It's a scourge.
It's a scourge. Can we use it? Can we use it for good? I mean, we know obviously there's so much negativity, and so much that impacts us in really a toxic way about social media. Does this make sense to you all, to both of you, that, you know, I'm really trying with this project and the team that's working on this to sort of harness this as a medium. I would argue as an artistic medium to tell our stories. As I said, Netflix isn't coming to me. Netflix isn't coming to you guys. I mean, we're not really out there, with the exception of Shtisel. We're really not, which has done incredible stuff. We're not out there showing, you know, telling our stories and really, you know, in artistic mediums so much. But can we say that using, you know, social media campaign where we have beautiful photography and, you know, telling stories through posts, is that a medium that really can work here and should be utilized? So you can talk about social media in general.
I think you could answer your own question.
Yeah.
If Netflix, ina nili mili.
Right.
If I'm not for myself, who is for me? Netflix isn't promoting our stories. If we don't promote them ourselves, no one's promoting them for us.
Right. Why not just say, you know what? Let's be who we are. Let's live our lives. Let's try to work on, you know, being strong Jews and committed Jews. And like, we don't need to make such an effort. We don't need to make such an effort to tell our stories. Is it so important?
I don't think Netflix is the enemy. I think we should be Netflix. These are all platforms, and when people complain about, you know, Netflix, you know, highlighting stories that don't reflect their own, I don't know. So whose fault is that? I mean, we need to we should promote people who can write scripts if that's where we want to be seen, who can share in those places. I think very organic storytelling always has a role and a place. I think Alex Edelman, who's a comedian, whose entire comedy set that I know Jerry Seinfeld, Ray Romano, every major comedian's gone to a show. He talks very much about Orthodox identity. If we have ways to tell out, you know, nobody wants universal stories that don't have hyper specificity. The more specific and nuanced it get, the more universal it becomes. A white bread and mayonnaise story, nobody wants that. And if we could find ways to do that, then we should absolutely do it. I don't like the idea of painting Netflix as our oppressor. I think that's on us. So
yeah, I had a lot of problems this summer when people were saying, I just wanted to
I just loved how it's like, I got such a kick out of like, you know, Ben and Jerry's, you know, really dissed Israel. Let's boycott Ben and Jerry's. Netflix dissed the Orthodox community. Yeah, I got a few more shows on my watch list. Or not.
I do have
no one's giving up Netflix.
I know. The thing is, I definitely had a problem when people were saying that Netflix is anti-Semitic. It's like, come on. Like, I think that is just, I really disagree. I think that is just a way too big of a leap, too much of a presumption. But, you know, just so, as I said, is my saving grace. I'm curious, have you guys seen it? Like, what your thoughts are about, you know, about the show?
So? I couldn't get through a single episode. It was so slow.
Because it's a little addictive once you get into it.
I could not. I love Tabadnikim, so I'd love to see that on Netflix.
Right.
I watched Gissel. I think the best depiction of Jewish life on media is actually appropriate. There's too much inappropriate scenes, but I know the very concept, and I've seen some clips from it, is a show called Rami, which is about a modern Orthodox Muslim. And the fact
I've seen
that Rami,
where is that? On Netflix?
I don't know what platform it's on.
Oh.
I've heard his comedy. He's a young up-and-coming comic. He just did a question and answer with Judd Apatow at the 92nd Street Y, and he's managed to tell a deeply religious story of Muslim faith for television, and it's a reminder that that's on us. Then you could tell the story.
Oh,
you know?
No, come on! The first episode, he's sleeping with a Jewish woman.
So what?
I mean, yeah,
Criticizing it
to
based
all
on
the things that you're saying, but it's the same. Basically,
what's the issue?
I'm,
Let's say a modern Orthodox.
I,
There was a show about modern Orthodoxy, and it opened up with a scene with a high schooler in a modern Orthodox high school who was struggling because he had fallen in love with somebody from another faith. Would that disqualify it as a depict? What do you think a depiction?
no, I'm not saying that you're saying I'm not disagreeing with anything that you're saying, but I imagine that there are many religious Muslim communities that take issue with that. And if there were a parallel Orthodox show, and on the first episode, the Orthodox character is sleeping with someone who's not Jewish, the Orthodox community would be up in arms.
But that's my point. I think what's preventing us from telling our story is our own community, because I don't think we would feel comfortable with the type of story that would actually, I think that it wouldn't be malicious, but would reflect the struggles of being an Orthodox Jew, which has to do with relationships with the other, sometimes romantic, and figuring it out. Meaning there's a Rosh Yeshiva who wrote a book under a pen name that's called BD Da'ehu. It's about falling in love with a non-Jewish woman in college campus. He's a chashuv Rosh Yeshiva. His son's an even bigger, more chashuv Rosh Yeshiva. It's called With All My Heart. Now, if that was made into a Netflix show, I have no doubt that, not knowing who the actual author is, the community would go bananas. They would say, oh, Netflix is at it again. And when I showed them, I said, you know who wrote this? You know, it's a Rosh Yeshiva. It's talking about, I don't know if he went through this experience, but it's a real experience. I think we have to be willing to talk about some of that tension. This person was, I mean, he didn't do it under his name. He did under a pen name, B.D. Da'ehu, which is a play on Bechol Duracheha Da'ehu. In all of my ways, I acknowledge him. And he shared this kind of story. So the way that we winced, and I don't blame you, I would have too, if an opening episode of an Orthodox show had something like a sin, a struggle, something untoward. But, oh, great, add it again. But maybe that's also a little bit of our lives, and we have to be willing to allow for that vulnerability, because otherwise you're not going to have the tension of storytelling. And it could be not that fine.
Right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. Like, I try to be authentic and real, and I appreciate when people share their struggles about Yiddishkeit, because I'm constantly grappling with my own. Like, oh, so you also, meaning you look like, you know, you're 100% all there, but like, all there in terms of your commitment to Judaism and to Torah. But like, if you can actually say, well, this mitzvah is hard for me, that to me is, I think it's so psychologically healthy, honestly.
How come no one's surprised when I say that I struggle with things? They're like,
well, you wrote a book about sinning, didn't
like,
you?
we know you're not.
I mean, wow. I mean, this is where you see this divide in terms of secular storytelling versus Orthodox storytelling, whatever that is, which we're just dabbling in. I think is, you know, as I said, there are certain boundaries. There's boundaries in terms of modesty, you know, tznius and tzniut, which is very valid. I had one of our subjects, and you know, these are all my guinea pigs, you know what I mean? Like they're in this project, their first time, they're getting their pictures taken, they're sharing their stories. You know, I so appreciate that, you know, they were willing to do this. But I came back and I was like, listen, I would love you to share a little bit more vulnerability. You know, what's something that you struggle with? And the subject was like, listen, I have something to share with you. Would it be amazing? It's a real pain point, but the subject isn't going to share it. Why? Well, it's going to break some boundaries in terms of family. It's going to, you know, not be appropriate for this person to share that part of their life. I think in the outside world, it's just in the outside world, in the secular world, and certainly in Hollywood and the media, it's just a very different approach. As we, you know, bear all, we share all, and that's going to be. You said that's the tension of storytelling. How can we make this effective and real and authentic, but still respect these guidelines that are very much part of our value system?
Can I introduce some unexpected tension?
Okay.
I have to go, unfortunately.
Well, it is time.
Is that bad? I'm so
Not at all. I told you 30, 45 minutes, so we're wrapping up.
yes, I'm gonna go, but Leslie,
Thank you so much.
Alex, it's so great to see you. Let's do it again. I love Instagram. But
Thank you, Dovid, for your time.
Twitter. Take care, friends.
Be well. Thank you so much.
You know, I want to say that I think the best example of Orthodox storytelling that I've ever seen is Rama Burstein's Fill the Void.
Oh, yes.
That movie was stunning. And what I loved about that movie was that it was a story where the characters happened to be Orthodox, but ultimately it was a story about family dynamics.
Right, that's right. And
more than anything else.
Yeah, that's what you got to
right, and right, if I could ever get into it, but I just can't. Yeah. But it's their orthodoxy wasn't the defining trait. It was a story. It was a story about a family. It was a story about people going through things, and they happened to be Orthodox. So therefore, the lives they lived were Orthodox. It was beautifully done.
That's right. And I think that sort of brings us full circle. Is humanizing, and you may not be able.
That's
to,
right. That's 100% right. And that I think was the feeling in Israel. That like, wow. Like that it humanized the Haredi population instead of it being an other.
Right. So both Shtisel and that film and Fill the Void, both is telling stories of the Haredi ultra-Orthodox Jewish community, where in Israel, which Leslie and I both may not even be able to relate to that, and that's not the world that we're coming from. And certainly a non-Jewish person who's watching that is like, hey, this is a completely foreign, culture, country, everything. But why was Shtisel, for example, so popular? Is like you said, it's telling real stories, exploring real human emotions and struggles that anyone can relate to, and then you start being fascinated by the lifestyle, and
then it also the window into a society that you don't otherwise get to see.
Exactly, and that's also fascinating. So I think that's a little bit about what we're trying to do. And Leslie, thank you so much for joining us.
You are welcome, Alex. It's always a pleasure.
I know. And Baltimore, Cleveland, this is how we get together on Instagram Lives. All right, everyone. Chag Kosher v'Sameach. Thank you so much. Have a happy Pesach, happy Passover, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much. Good Shabbos.
Good night. Good Shabbos.
Take care. Have a great night. Okay.